This is shepherd's pie made with American lamb, and it is one of the most satisfying, savory, comforting dishes that you'll ever eat. And I'm gonna show you how to make it. I'm gonna make the mashed potatoes first, get these cooking, and then while these potatoes cook, I will prep the rest of the ingredients that'll be for the filling of the shepherd's pie. You might have heard of shepherd's pie or cottage pie, and they're really similar. Cottage pie is with beef and shepherd's pie is with lamb, and today we're using American lamb, so we are making shepherd's pie. It's also a good idea to preheat your oven while you're at this stage now so that it is ready to go when your filling is all done. I'm gonna dice these potatoes in about 1-inch dices. They'll cook a lot faster. And before boiling the potatoes, I like to give them a rinse. This will get some of the starch out and make for a better texture for your mashed potatoes. Cover the potatoes, about 1 inch of water. We'll bring those to a boil and let them simmer until they're nice and soft. We'll also add some salt to the water. We're just gonna dice up our mirepoix of vegetables into very similar size, little 1/4-inch dice. Does not have to be perfect because this is a very rustic dish. This is also one of those dishes that when you kind of look at the recipe, you're like, oh gosh, that's a lot of steps or a lot of ingredients, but really it's just, once you make it, get everything prepped, it all comes together pretty quickly. You can actually make it ahead of time, make everything, put the mashed potatoes on top, put it in the fridge. You could then put it in the oven or the smoker the next day. Same thing with our celery. I'm gonna heat our skillet over medium-high heat. This is 1.5 pounds of American lamb. This is raised in California. Break it up with the back of a wooden spoon. With lamb, you can't often choose what fat percentage that you get. So if there is a lot of fat in here, we're gonna drain it off so we're not making our shepherd's pie too greasy. All right, our meat here is pretty much cooked through. Our potatoes here are nice and fork tender. When it comes to mashed potatoes, dry potatoes are good potatoes. So I'm actually gonna put this back on the heat for just a couple of minutes after I drained it to cook off some of that moisture that is absorbed into the potatoes. You don't wanna brown them or anything, but just to keep them nice and hot and cook off a little, let them steam a little bit more. I like to use a ricer for the mashed potatoes, just passes it through this. It just removes all the lumps. I heated the cream. We're gonna add about 2/3 of the cream, and we can add the rest right before we put the mashed potatoes on the shepherd's pie if we need to loosen up the mashed potatoes a little bit. Sometimes they'll tighten up if they sit for a few. Also warm this bowl, and then the butter is at room temperature. I'm gonna add 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter and about 2/3 of our cream. I'm using heavy cream. You can use milk if you prefer. Season these up. I did add salt to the water, which is kind of the only way you can really, the only time you're gonna be able to season the inside of the potatoes. Plus it raises the boiling temperature, makes them cook a little bit faster. I like to add plenty of freshly ground pepper and then just get these all incorporated. And then we're gonna tightly cover these with some plastic wrap. I'm actually gonna put the plastic wrap all the way down to the surface of the potatoes so that they stay nice and warm and don't get any surface dryness on them. If you want, you could put them on a double boiler that you just have some very warm water. Don't forget to turn that off. You don't wanna actually boil the potatoes again. There's quite a bit of fat in here, and I'm gonna spoon a lot of that off, all but about maybe a tablespoon or 2. Transfer the lamb to a bowl. We'll add it back in after we cook our mirepoix. Now back over medium heat with about a tablespoon or 2 of the fat still in here. We're gonna cook our mirepoix for 4 to 6 minutes till it's nice and softened. You don't really want it to be crunchy for this. You can also season it with some salt, which will help draw that moisture out and soften it up. So now we're gonna just add the lamb back, add our garlic, cook that for about a minute. Stir in our tomato paste before we deglaze the pan with the red wine. And as you're cooking this and you see any little pieces that need to be broken up that are a little bit too big, you can just carefully, make sure they're not too hot. Go in there and break them up. Now we'll deglaze with just a little red wine. It's not a whole lot of red wine, but it adds some acidity. Now we'll add the rest of the ingredients. The stock, I'm using chicken stock, but you can use lamb stock if you have it. And the Worcestershire sauce, as well as the bay leaf and the fresh thyme. I chopped the fresh thyme. You could leave the sprigs whole if you want and then take them out later. And I'm gonna add a little bit of flour to make this kind of a gravy. Mix this up in a little section that's nice and wet. So this is going to thicken it up. You can use cornstarch too if you want. Just gonna bring this up to a simmer and let it thicken about 5 minutes. Don't wanna boil it hard. And if you need to, you can always add more stock to loosen it up if it needs to be loosened, but this is about what we're going for. We'll let it go for 4 or 5 minutes. Just gently cook. We're gonna remove our bay leaf and take this off the heat. Then we'll finish our mashed potatoes by adding the remaining cream back in. You can totally use the same vessel that you made the base in, but I like to use a 10-inch skillet. And since I'm gonna actually put this in the smoker, I am going to use a cast iron skillet. It's a little bit easier to clean when it's in the smoker. So the reason I like a 10-inch skillet is that it increases the height of the base a little bit. One thing I didn't mention is you do want to taste your base to make sure that it's seasoned right, doesn't need any adjustments in the flavorings. Then we are just going to get our mashed potatoes and very gently spread them out with a spatula. I'm just gonna go all the way to the edge. The last and maybe most fun step of making this is to use a fork and to rake the top of the mashed potatoes. You can do it in any kind of cool pattern that you want. I'm not really an artist, so I'm just gonna drag directly across here, but you could do circle motions, you could use anything. And basically what that's doing is you're gonna be able to brown the edges of those mashed potatoes. Preheated 375 degree smoker. Here's the shepherd's pie out of the smoker. It smells so good. I'm letting it cool off for just a few minutes because it didn't get that brown on it. Now it is perfectly brown on top because I threw it under the broiler. Let it cool off. We're gonna dig in just a minute. And as I was putting it under the broiler, I realized I did not put the frozen peas in at the end, which I've definitely made that mistake before when making these. So don't do that. Make sure you get the frozen peas in there. You get meat, you get potatoes. And of course, the most important thing is how it tastes. The lamb, it's so savory, everything goes together super, super well. The flavors of all the mirepoix, the vegetables, I can even taste the red wine in there. It all balances out with that American lamb and the mashed potatoes. So much great flavor. You get a little bit of the smoke in the mashed potatoes because it was cooked in the smoker, but if you cook it in the oven or in the smoker, it doesn't really matter. It's gonna come out great. It's one of those dishes you can't stop eating and you hope that there's leftovers for lunch tomorrow or dinner tomorrow because it's that good. The only thing I forgot are those peas. This is shepherd's pie and it is delicious.